Now, too, the starships were faster. 100 light-years was a short journey. 1,000 was not impractical. Explorers had gone many times farther and reported worlds still waiting for mankind on beyond. But still, the great majority of discovered planets did not contain life. Whole solar systems floated in space with no single living cell on any of their members. So the seed ships came into being. Theirs was not a glamorous service. They merely methodically contaminated the sterile worlds with life. The seed ship Orana landed on this planet, which still had no name. It carefully infected it. It circled endlessly above the clouds, dribbling out a fine dust, the spores of every conceivable microorganism which could break down rock to powder and turn that dust to soil. It was also a seeding of molds and fungi and lichens and everything which could turn powdery primitive soil into stuff on which higher forms of life could grow. The Orana polluted the seas with plankton. Then it, too, went away. More centuries passed. Human ships again improved. 1,000 light-years became a short journey. Explorers reached the galaxy's very edge and looked estimatingly across the emptiness toward other island universes. There were colonies in the Milky Way. There were freight lines between star clusters, and the commercial center of human affairs shifted some hundreds of parsecs toward the rim. There were many worlds where the schools painstakingly taught the children what Earth was and where, and that all other worlds had been populated from it. And the schools repeated, too, the one lesson that humankind seemed genuinely to have learned: that the secret of peace is freedom, and the secret of freedom is to be able to move away from people with whom you do not agree. There were no crowded worlds anymore, but human beings love children, and they have them, and children grow up and need room, so more worlds had to be looked out for. They weren't urgently needed yet, but they would be. Therefore, nearly 1,000 years after the Orana, the ecology ship Ludred swam to the planet from space and landed on it. It was a gigantic ship of highly improbable purpose. First of all, it checked on the consequences of the Orana's visit. They were highly satisfactory from a technical point of view. Now there was soil which swarmed with minute living things. There were fungi which throve monstrously. The seas stank of minuscule life forms. There were even some novelties developed by the strictly local conditions. There were, for example, paramecia as big as grapes, and yeasts had increased in size until they bore flowers visible to the naked eye. The life on the planet was not aboriginal, though. All of it was descended and adapted and modified from the microorganisms planted by the seed ship, whose hulk was long since rust, and whose crew were merely names in genealogies, if that. The Ludred stayed on the planet a considerably longer time than either of the ships that had visited it before. It dropped the seeds of plants. It broadcast innumerable varieties of things which should take root and grow. In some places, it deliberately seeded the stinking soil. It put marine plants in the oceans. It put alpine plants on the high ground. And when all its stable varieties were set out, it added plants which were genetically unstable. For generations to come, they would throw spores, some of which should be especially suited to this planetary environment. Before it left, the Ludred dumped finny fish into the seas. At first, they would live on the plankton, which made the oceans almost broth. There were many varieties of fish. Some would multiply swiftly while small. Others would grow and feed on the smaller varieties. And, as a last activity, the Ludred set up refrigeration units loaded with insect eggs. Some would release their contents as soon as plants had grown enough to furnish them with food. Others would allow their contents to hatch only after certain other varieties had multiplied to be their food supply. When the ecology ship left, it had done a very painstaking job. It had treated the planet to a sort of Russell's mixture of life forms. The real Russell's mixture is that blend of the simple elements in the proportions found in suns.